Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Wanted to share some information with you tonight. The name of the book is called The Temple of Man. This will be chapter 7 and 8. And I'm actually on my channel here on YouTube, Discerning What is True, and also on Facebook. Also, this particular book is by Rene Schwaller de Lubicz. Um, the key is simply I'm reading the last two chapters tonight. I'd like to get them done simply is because it's good, important information to get out to others, and for people to understand that Egyptians were not. They were very aware of a lot of things that we in our day are just beginning to understand. So the chapter 7 is called the crossing, called the Egyptian mentality. So we're going to be reading from this particular book, the Temple of Man. I should say not Temple of Man, but the Temple in Man, and it's called the Crossing Egyptian Mentality. This is like a 3 or 4 page chapter, and then we'll go ahead and read the last chapter at the ending of the book. The few basic philosophical elements that I have briefly reviewed in an effort to explain the method of the ancients for applying the architectural symbolism are not sufficient to explain the basics of the mentality of pharaonic Egypt. I've said that this mentality presented itself as vitalist, but this epithet does not simply mean that a spiritual or metaphysical principle presides over life. That would be a definition in the Occidental spirit, consistent with a direct mentality, which I call mechanical, because each element of the thought is given directly and meshes with another thought to formulate a conclusion within set limits. Also called the mentality mechanical because it seeks to make every notion objective and attribute all the values to the thing, to the arrested idea. That is to say, the idea framed in time and space. The pharaonic mentality is typical indirect. A defined form is used to evoke the idea of this form. That is to say, the abstract complex that presides over this defined form. The best way to make myself understood would be to following images. That is, if it is a fairly dark room, we stare at the spot of bright light for a while. When we close our eyes, we shall see in lane of this bright spot the same spot, only dark. Similarly, if we stare at the bright color, for example, green, when we close our eye, we shall see the exact complementary shade of red. The Occidental the Occidental would say that light and the color green are the reality. The ancient Egyptians would say that the reality is the inner vision outside of the object. This example can also be used to explain what I mean by vital reaction, the concept vitalist implies for the ancients, the evidence of the vital phenomenon as based on the principle of reaction. We find a very similar mental disposition in China, at least in the ancient China, still imbued with the wisdom of old. There is a valid psychological reason behind this matter of thought, the fact of expressing a desire very easily provoking a subconscious resistance of doubt. Now, there is more power in subconscious doubt than in conscious belief, hence the instinctive and unconscious race to deny or prevent the production or realization of what was desired. But the reason for this indirect mentality among the ancient Egyptians is based on the certain fact that everything in nature, which is alive, is provoked by the action of the complement. This creates the crossing and the play of resistance. Before one can inhale deeply, one must first exhale all the air in the lungs. This would be the vital reaction, the reaction of the organism, which is the real action and not the voluntary action imposed on it. Similarly, the decomposing action of death brings about new life in organic matter. Hence the paradox that we die the moment the cells of our body cease dying. Or is there constant death that supports life? That is to say, regeneration. However, this is still only the physical aspect of reaction. For the mental aspect and consciousness, the reality of man is aroused by provoking the reaction through the brutal concrete fact. This reality, which is in us, is measured by the state of consciousness or of intellectual culture. We react to the extent that is fitting for us, and this will be a factual reality. Whereas the thought imposed on the thought imposed on us remains outside of us. That is to say, it penetrates no further than into our memory. And only what we have experienced, that is, one would say, suffer, impregnates our being and can modify our innate consciousness. The reasoning could be formulated generally as follows. We become aware, that is to say, we can qualify a thing or a idea only by means of comparison. The extreme comparisons for being would be non-being. For us, a thing exists only because it can, in the final analysis, not be. Now, presence is susceptible to changes, but absence, non-being, is immutable. This reasoning of absurdity, however, underlies any philosophy of unity, that is to say, God. Within this non-being of nature, which comprises all things, is summarized like a seed, everything that can be. Ancient Egypt accords the entire value to this cause and not the object that is emanated from it. When the ancients draw a figure, it is not the figure they look at, but what they are projecting of themselves into that figure. Physically, they view this figure as a shadow, a silhouette against the light of its absence. They detect its contours. When they draw a geometric figure, it is not this figure which interests them, but the exorbitant law that presides it and the inevitable consequences that the law provokes. Thus, geometry takes on the same living characteristics of life as the images they carve or draw. The summary of principles here is that the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehends it not. John 1:5. Affirmation and negation are compensatory and together create nothingness. The cross once drawn, emphasis, it says yes and no at the same time, but negation denies itself, and affirmation can only affirm itself. Simply crossing effaces. Double crossing denies the negation and affirms the affirmation. The crossed fist of the royal mummy is a death gesture, the second crossing indicated by the scepters, which is the resurrection. This is the death of one form for the life of another state in which the mortal negation is eliminated. I would say to create is to make something from nothing. Thus, this nothing is virtually this thing. The created thing will be the negation of nothing, the affirmation of the corporate form. To negate this nothing is to pass from the virtual to the actual. But the negation of nothing is absurd. Hence, negation can only apply to the thing which is transcendental, which is able not to be. Thus, the negation of the present bodily form is the affirmation of its virtue, indestructible reality. That which is able not to be in its present form, but is ideal or virtue reality, does not cease to be as a possibility, immanent in the general cause whence the whole where the whole emanates. Is the present form necessary? It matters little. Its possibility exists. It will be if it voids exist. If it's absent, it imposes itself. There will be light if the darkness feels its absence. The consciousness of the absence of light will create the call that will make the light shine. This is the true prayer. It is the evocation that is to pharaonic mentality. Chapter 8. Sorry about that. The Egyptian canon for a standing man. Definitions should be used only as a point of comparison. It is this that the canon and the principle of proportions for the construction of the figure should be viewed. This allows one to note all the variations and distortions in the representation in order to know the idea that is being expressed. The canon, in terms of its relationship to the system of quadratic by 19 units. This is by E. Mackey, notes that in Egyptian quadration, a line passes in front of the ear and back knee and ends on the baseline at a point located 1 square behind the big toe of the back foot. Another important line immediately in front of the preceding one passes through the middle of the iris of the eye and ends at the big toe of the back foot. This line that passes in front of the ear is thus found on the static axis in the standing and walking man. On this line are the similar canals of the inner ear in which are located the sense of orientation and stability. The axis of movement passes through the eye. The eyes are luminaries. The eyes guide. One goes towards what one is looking at, and it is on the big toe of the back foot that one places one's weight in order to advance. That's from Mackey, saying that was from proportion squares on tomb walls in the Thelbert necropolis. Two methods of quadrant are known. The first method divides the height of the entire man into 19 units. The second divides the height of the entire man in 22 units, or sometimes 22 and a fraction. The multiplicity of other divisions are not to be trusted. They have nothing to do with the canon. Their aim is to locate measures, or they serve as symbols. In certain instances, at the divisions by 7 units, it is a matter of simplification of the placement of the outline. When, for example, one wishes to make the total height equal to 7 heads. The method of 19 squares, which is quite inconvenient for the divisions of a number of digits that is multiple of 24 or 28, is nonetheless the method that corresponds best to geometrically construction with phi and provide the explanation of the pharaonic canon. A square is constructed whose side equals the height of the man, including the crown of the skull. This height counts as 19. And see figure page 45 here. Let's see if this is it here. Yes. The crown of the skull, which counts as 1, is then removed. There remains 18 for the height, including the crown. In the width of the square is added the height of the crown, given the phantom, that is 20 units. Then, to determine the person's navel, the height is considered as if it were that of the mane, including the crown. This height of 18 is divided by phi to locate the navel slightly above 11 units, starting from the sole of the feet. This is a general scheme revealed by the use of the number 19, but in reality it's necessary to observe that the coefficient C, that is to say, the value of the crown, is variable and constitutes the personal model. According to the measurements recorded at Luxor and based on a great number of other monuments, the quadra would permit only the following measurements to be located almost uniformly. The length of the feet equals 3 units. Unit of the widths of the composition. Height of the knees, that is, equals 5 1/4 to 6 units, between which is located the kneecap. Height of the shoulders is equals 16 units. That is, beginning of the neck. Height of the forehead is 18 units. Line of the hair piece. Height of the vertex or the uterus of 19 units. Other essential points, such as the apron, the belt, the navel, the breast, the corset, the necklace, the chin, corresponds either to a personal proportion or to desire to indicate a very definite measure. The proportions most frequently encountered in all the averages established by contemporary anthropology for the ratio between man's height and the spread of his arms are 1.03 and 1.045. Now I'm going to show you the picture here of figure 45. There it is right there. The ratio 19 to 20 can only be an approximate. The headband, which must not be confused with the delineation of the forehead, gives the personal monocle. The monocle is the adult subject of this temple, is indeed 1.03 and 1.045. To cast some light on the refinement of this system of quadrant, in the Egyptian canon, I provide here the name, same face, divided according to the method of 19 squares, as in figure 46. And according to the golden section, what I would call figure 47. Calculations prove that in these two divisions, the forehead and the upper edge of the headband coincide with hundredths. If the top of the headband is placed at 18.5 squares, thus we find it possible to make the module, the path of the phi at the place of 19 squares coincides very closely. The system of 19 squares gives the broadest approximation of phi that is adequate in practical terms. This facilitates the technician work, and then the master could make rectifications without revealing the essential functions. For example, the navel falls at 11 squares, starting from the soles of the feet, but it should be located 11.4 in the case cited earlier. Such a rectification can be made unerringly by a practice eye, which explains the many still visible corrections often found in the outlines. So I'm going to show you these two here. This is figure 46. So that is the detail of the application of methods of 19 sections at the face of such and such 20. But for the coefficient of C, we round off the number in the nearest thousands and simplify the reading. But proof exists in the plan, more thorough exactitude corresponding to the real functions, which a specialist can easily discern. And then I'll share this particular figure here, which is 47, which is somewhat similar to the other one. A study in the proportions between the head represents the payment and the body establishes according to the measurements of the temple. This study shows us two rhymes in the measure of the man of Luxor. Number one, the measure of the incorporated man, which gives for the length of the temple, that is 140 fathoms, is the man excluding the crown of the skull, and would give 142 fathoms for the man including the crown. Number two, for the head or control part of the body, there is a different measurement whose rhythm would give 265.74 to 265.83 meters, I guess that is, as the total measurement of the man, including the crown of the skull. The greatest length of the temple from the south wall to the west pylon is 258 meters, which corresponds to 140 meridian fathoms at 0 degrees. Number one, the proportion most widely adopted for the size of the human head is 13/100, the height. The head is then counted at 7.692 times in the total height. And the person is represented in the bas relief at Luxor. This proportion varies between 7 and 7.5 heads, depending on the intention. In trying to find out on what basis the complete person should be founded, I had to go along with the indications given by with the head in the payment, and I got 18 phantoms for the length of FM. Taking the crown of the skull as 2 phantoms, this would give 20. When speaking of the measurements of the temple in relation to those of the man, I shall adopt the following conventions. That is, man without the crown of the skull is FP, and head without the crown of the skull is FM. Man with the crown of skull is TP, and the head with crown of the skull is TM in figure 48. So this is going to be, again, I'm going to share this figure 48, what I'll call, he has here, the Temple of Zazor, the diagram showing the ages of man. So the phantoms for the head TM, furthermore, since the total length of the temple FP equals 140 phantoms, the head would thus be contained 7 times in this length and 7.1 times in the theoretical length of TP. Hence, the symphysis pupius should be located halfway along the total length of TP. That is a measurement verified. This point lies in the thickness of the south wall, separating the court of Amenius III from the colonnade of Amon, I should say. This being so, the eye in the pavement is too high for a figure whose geometric outline divides the face into 2 equal parts, passing through the upper eyelid. The half head of 10 phantoms would be located at the midpoint of the eye. However, the entire skeleton of the person is corresponding strictly to the proportions of a man whose height comprises of 7.1 heads, as is shown in plates based on medical data. It is indeed this measurement, FM, that governs the general plan. It's considering only the head, in relation to the rest of the temple as we are dealing with, then with a man whose head slightly too large gives precisely the proportions of a boy before puberty who has reached the age of 12 at the maximum. This is confirmed by the fact that the king is represented as a child between 7 and 12 years old, with his mother only in sanctuary 7, where the pineal gland is located. It is this gland which changes at this age. With the awakening of the intelligence in harmony with the sexual apparatus, in order to pass from the pineal eye phase into the epiphanious state. Moreover, this temple is said to be the one in which the king spent his childhood. Let us recall in the Gospel of St. Luke, that is chapter 2, 41 through 49, the journey to Jerusalem of the child Jesus with his parents when he has reached his 12th year, and how, while wandering in the temple, he astonished the doctors with his intelligence and knowledge. The 2 rhymes of the Temple of Zor show us that by, this is number 8, that is by overly large head in the pavement, this temple indicates a definite age of 12 years. And that, however, all the stages of growth, past and future, of this child are transcribed in measurement in the different stages of this architecture. B, a geometric action that makes the defined measures the canon and the 2 personal coefficients of the persons of 7.1 and 6.5 heads contained in the development of the temple coincide. Actual natural growth shows by the measurement of the temple. Daffer gives 50.6 centimeters for a newborn infant whose future height would be 166.5 centimeters. Now, the relation between these 2 measurements is 3.2906. Moreover, the Westcar Papyrus, a prophetic text which is attributed to the 4th dynasty and concerns the child king who is to become head of the line of the 5th dynasty, assigns to the newborn a cubit length. This relationship between a cubit and the height of an adult man constructs according to the phantom and the perfect canon would be exactly 3.274. Finally, the relationship between the future length of the temple, TP, and that of the platform, FB, is 3.274. Furthermore, the total length of the newborn is equivalent to 4 heads, and the head of the child king comprises the south sanctuary and room 12. Thus, all the vital centers whose positions remain stable in the course of man's development. See figure 49. During man's growth, this center does not move, as if the center organs of the intellect located in the sanctuaries, where the fixed point around which the entire body oscillates. The covered temple represents the newborn infant. The second stage of construction includes the peristyle court, hence the child at 2 or 2.5 years old, since according to tradition and confirmed by anthropology, he has reached half his total future height, the age of the Ataman, according to Thooris, Thooris. The third stage of the construction adds the nave, and the child is then 7 or 8 years old, the age of respiration, says Thooris. Thus, the capitals of the columns of the nave are open corridors. Amenius III ceases construction at this point. Ramses added on the court and the pylons, and there we find the final phases of construction. Towards 12 years, the child attains about 5/6 of his future height, which brings us to the west door of the court of Ramses. The dimension of the head of this 12-year-old child is indicated on the plan by the length of FM, and the ratio between the head and the height of the child, being FJ, is 6.481. It should be noted that it is by the west door of the court of Ramses that both the Bark and the princes enter the temple. As a bas relief indicates. Finally, with the pylons, we find the proportions of a young man of about 18 years old, whose head TM is contained in TP 7.1 times. All of the foregoing is based solely on the play of 140 and 142 fathoms for the length of FP and TP of the temple. Now the face in itself comes into play. While enlarging the persons, it will still, its final proportions bring us back to the age of 12. Section B, geometric play. As is shown in the geometric outline of the face according to the canon, figure 46, the crown of the skull marked off by the headband representing 1 phi of the height of a head with value 2, so that the length FM equals 5. Moreover, we have seen that for a purchase whose height measures 7.1 heads, which is the case for the skeletons superimposed on the general plan. The perfect coefficient of the module is 1.03. So we're going to show you this particular figure. Now, the figure traced on the ground, demonstrates that the south wall F represents the upper edge of the headband. Thus, the length FP must be multiplied by 1.03 in order to get the theoretical length of the man suggested by the face in the pavement. The paving stones that mark the upper eyelid is at a distance of 20.50 meters from the key at the crossing of the axis delimiting the bottom of the face, the chin. The face traced on the ground thus belongs to a hand 41 meters long, of which the crown of the skull measures 7.83 meters, to which we should add 258 meters in order to have the complete man of 265.83 meters. We may compare that to the last result with the application of the module at 265.74 meters. Thus, there is a geometric coincidence, but the head is included in the total length of only 6.481 times, which brings us back to the proportion of a 12-year-old child on the head of the pavement. A final proof for the measurements of the temple and their rectification, that is double rhyme, is given by the west wall of sanctuary of figure 50 and the royal figure B. Here we are dealing with a royal purchase without a navel, hence with a creation and not a procreation through woman, that is to say, in keeping with the principle of Kamutev. The proportion between the head and the height of the body. This is figure 50, like I'm sure, west wall of the sanctuary. Be a little harder to see here, so I'm going to try to. Okay. Changes with age. If one wishes to change the age of a person on a bas relief, one can modify only the size of the head and not the size of the legs, which are limited by the baseline. This is exactly the problem of the temple that we find explained in the ornamental bas relief. Here we see 5 kings, just as there are 5 basic chains of axis and 5 ages indicated. The first king to the north, A, is the smallest. His height comprises about 7.1 heads. The last king to the sixth, that is the E, is the largest of all. His height from the ground to the vertex comprises only about 6.5 heads. The second king, B, has 2 very clearly determined measurements of height from the ground to the vertex and from the ground to the head of the uraeus. In addition to the outlines of 2 superimposed faces can be seen. The original profile of the head was rectified in such a way that the old profile subsists as evidence as a point of comparison with the new profile, figure 51 and 52. The original face gave the profile a size of corresponding to a 6.5 heads within the total height, hence the proportion of a 12-year-old child. The rectified profile reduces the size of the face, which then is contained only 7.1 times in the height defined by the uraeus, and the proportion becomes that of an adult man of 18, according to the Egyptian canon. Thus, we have in this bas relief the representation of a temple itself, and this bas relief is found in a place that corresponds physiologically to the profound transformations at the age of puberty. This is one more proof that the entire principle of growth and transformation of the microcosmic man serves as a symbolic basis for this temple. The summary of the measure of this arrangement of proportions is provided below. We should find in the general dimensions of the temple as considered as a man as application of the Egyptian canon. That is to say, we should be able to divide the length of the temple, TP, by 19 and get a unit of measurement that applies to the whole of the architecture. Moreover, if the west wall of the sanctuary, I truly indicate the program of the 2 rhymes of the temple, we should find these indications of confirmations of these measures. Now, in fact, in order to find the position lengths of the man in the temple parallel to the axis of measures, we must take the height indicated by the first king to the north, king A, figure 50, and multiply it by 19 times 10, and we shall find the proposal length of the measurement TP containing the persons of 7.1 heads. Then we must take the height indicated by the last king to the south, that is king E, figure 50, and multiply it by 19 times 10, and we shall have the predicted dimension for the persons of 6.5 heads in the temple. These figures not only confirm the hypothesis of the 2 rhymes, but specify their dimensions in such a way that by simply multiplying the height of king A by 10, we get the unit of measurement that can be used and place the entire temple in a grid. The temple being considered as a personus. This unit multiplied by 19 gives the height of the 18-year-old man and consequently the length of the temple. In sums, king A and E indicate by their proportions and measurements the 2 rhymes of the temple, viewed along the axis of measure. King B shows the application of this double rhyme. Now, figure 51 is the Zora, the west wall of sanctuary. 2 profiles of king B. and figure 52. So the one on this one is the 51, and the other one is 52. Sorry about that. So the one on my left is one that is sketched in the stone, and the other one's just simply a drawing, as far as I can tell. So I have the last part here saying simply the conclusions by Rene. And there are 7 points here. The elements observed in the temple of Lazora prove that, number one, that the pharaonic temple has a didactic purpose, hence every detail has its import. 2, the entire value is according to the teachings. The technical aspect is subordinate to this aim. 3, that there is in the inscription by means of texts and figurations a method for translating a philosophical ordained thought. 4, that symbolism is the method of transcription of the thought of the ancient Egyptians in writing and in figuration as well as in the architecture. 5, that there is a pre-calculated program realized through time by successive kings, heirs of the tradition. 6, that the monument is construed or constructed contrary to our current principles of architecture on several axes, that each axis has a meaning, and that this meaning dictates the meaning of the parts subordinated to it. 7, that there is in pharaonic Egypt geodetic, astronomical, and physiological knowledge surpassing that which Egyptology has hitherto been able to conclude. And he has down here also a kind of important last part. The Nidra means principle of life, and the temple is its house. Thank you for being here with the conclusion of the book here by the temple within man, that is in man himself, by Rene Schwaller. Thank you for this. We started this probably about maybe, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, maybe started this. And again, like I said, I've got many books here by Rene Schwaller, and I want to share these, and then I want to get into what I call a gentleman named Alvin Boyd Kuhn, which I have a lot of interest also in. But tonight I wanted to read this particular book and share this with others, and hopefully it will be well worth the listening for you to be here. And so at this point, I'll say good night and wish you well, and you take care.